Hello, I'm Dr. H Gene Wright II, and I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist from Philadelphia. My day job is Director of Behavioral Health and Justice for the City of Philadelphia. And what that entails is that I oversee all the programs and initiatives that support individuals coming back to the community from incarceration and/or psychiatric hospitalization. And what that really means is that we have a recognition at the Department of Behavioral Health that when returning citizens come back to the community, they have many needs. Many of which, because I'm a behavioral health specialist, is that they have mental health challenges, and they also have substance use and dependence challenges, but they also have quality of life issues like being able to handle financial obligations. They may have child support, they may have a lack of housing or adequate housing. They may have broken relationships or severed relationships with family and may not have a support system. And one of the main things I can tell you is that when you look at what a returning citizen needs, they need secure, stable housing, they need a positive social environment, or what we call protective factors. They have lots of risk factors. They need protective factors. And then they need the ability to earn a living so that they can meet their obligations. Pretty much any of us understand that we all have financial obligations. Well, when you've been incarcerated for a number of years, you can imagine the amount of losses that start to add up. And as someone said during the Message magazine program today, the family is also doing time. It's not just the individual that is incarcerated, so that's important. So programs like the Power Weekend Message magazine and looking at incarceration is important because we want to get the church to understand their role, what it is that they can do. I have a love for young people in particular. When I was doing a private practice, I saw young people from 12 to 19, and sometimes I go a little bit under 12, and then I had an adult practice. And so one of the things I really emphasize is that a lot of young people are dealing with trauma, what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. And what that means is that a large group of our population, especially in communities of color, African American, Latino especially, their children are dealing with lack of parental supervision. They're dealing with lack of structured activities. They may be witnessing violence, domestic violence in the home. They may be being abused or hurt themselves, neglect, where they do not have the basic physiological needs that we all take for granted. All these things add up to trauma. And when you have trauma and it's unresolved and something really horrible or bad has happened to you, you can develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And post-traumatic stress disorder can actually change the brain chemistry. And so young people that are suffering with some of these issues may make decisions that they normally wouldn't make. You have to also understand that a young person is still dealing with a developing brain, whether it's childhood or youth or teenager or even young adulthood. Our brains do not stop developing until we get into our early 20s. And so if you are dealing with this trauma and it's unresolved and you're dealing with stressors in the community, and think of stressors as people, places, and things, trials and tribulations, and you're out there on your own trying to figure out how to make it, not having the wherewithal, not having the developmental stability that you need. Most adults couldn't deal with some of the stuff these young people are dealing with. And so added that, feeling lonely, feeling left out, not feeling like you fit in, trying to go to school but not having the wherewithal, not getting a decent meal, all of these things add up to a young person feeling lost and alone. So what can the church do? The church can absolutely do three things. On the one hand, we have prison ministries, which is fine. People have already been incarcerated. You go inside, you help them, you prepare them for when they return to the community, and we have lots of programs for that. In Philadelphia, we have something called Community Forgiveness and Restoration, which is that we have churches and masjids, because we deal with Christians and Muslims that are predominantly the ones that are behind the walls in Philadelphia, that when they return home, this congregation and or masjid goes in a year before the returning citizen leaves and is discharged and starts and begins a relationship with them. They do Bible studies, they work with them, they help prepare them for resumes and jobs when they get out, so that when they get out, it is not a new relationship. It is something that has been forged and ongoing for a period of time where that has been solidified. And then when they get out, that congregation or masjid is really, they've committed to a year. okay? And that during that year, that is a place to live, food, clothing, a job or assistance in getting a job, where possible, reconnection with family. And so that's a great thing. And so that's on the reentry side. In terms of before a person actually gets there, or what we call diversion. So what we can do is we work with young people and older people as well in terms of how do we help them not go in the first place. And so they may have allegedly committed a crime or been arrested for a crime. And so we show up at parole hearings, we show up for probation reviews to see if that individual, instead of doing more time or going into jail, they can get a probation sentence, or they can get another type of support that does not necessarily mean incarceration, or we can testify on their behalf to get a shorter sentence. And so that would be diversion, or trying to get a person probation. And again, the same thing applies in terms of the type of services and resources that we hope to put in their hand and to surround them with, because when you surround a person with love and resources, they have a much better opportunity and not feel stressed like, oh my goodness, I get out, I got to report to my probation officer, I got to get a job, I got to take care of my child support, I got all these things they have to do. And it's really overwhelming and disheartening when you look around and there's nobody standing with you. And so that's the thing that we can do. And then on the front end of that, what we call prevention. So we talked about reentry programs. We talk about trying to work with people for diversion and get them into parole or probation. Parole if you're already in and getting out. Probation if we're trying to get a diversion from going in. But prevention, how do we work with people so that they do not find themselves in the circumstance of going into the criminal justice system in the first place? This is where it's so important for the church. Not that the other two areas are not important. Yes, the church is doing that. Every church I know has a prison ministry. But do you have a organized program to work with individuals in the community that are vulnerable, that are at risk? That's the kind of programs that the church really needs to beef up, because that's where we're going to be able to really impact a larger majority of people. And so for that to happen, I'm really talking about children and youth. That is where the resources need to really be focused, because again, it's easier to deal with a child that is learning and someone that you can teach some things than to try to help an adult that is already on the other side of things. Both are needed, but the one working with children is really paramount. And so what do we do for children, or what should we be doing for children as a church? We need to have structured activities that anyone in the community can join and participate in. We need to show love. That is, I can't even describe how important that is. That no witness is helpful or effective without love. And so how do we do that? Vacation Bible schools. Remember those things? I mean, there was a time, man, when vacation Bible schools were like the thing. I make sure I find one every summer for my child, and he's almost 12 now, almost 13. Vacation Bible schools. And the ones that I choose have denominations and non-denominations and people who are just in the neighborhood. They invite them. Why? You get breakfast and you get lunch. Imagine that. That will make a difference in a child's life. That will make a difference in a parent's life that's struggling. If for a week out of the summer, hopefully we can make it longer, can get breakfast and lunch for their child, they don't have to worry about it. And then they're doing fun, safe, secure activities with proper adult supervision. That is so key. The other thing we have to do is meet young people where they are. Stop asking kids what's wrong with them. Their behavior is a symptom of the challenges that they're dealing with. And so when we see them acting out or doing things that we disapprove of or do not meet a standard, then instead of chastising them, we need to recognize the red flag. We need to recognize the cry for help. And we need to meet them where they are. If they're hungry, feed them. If they don't have activities that are wholesome and constructive, invite them to a church organization. And then once we get them here, it's important that the young people that we have in the church that remain, we connect them with those young people, which means we got to give the young people who are already in the church more responsibility. We got to train them to be leaders. We got to educate them on the word and the gospel so that they can deliver it with confidence to their peers. There's something called peer intervention. Certified peer specialists, we use those in Philadelphia, we use them all over the country. What it really means is connecting people with like experiences. And so when you have a person that is recovering from mental illness or substance use or abuse, That is a peer. If you have a person who is a returning citizen and they are on their feet and they're doing well, that is a peer. We want to connect those people to folks before they find themselves in the same situation. Yes, we can connect them if they're already incarcerated. We can connect them before they come home. But why not put the emphasis on the front end? That's what we need to do to help young people. Meet them where they are, show them love, meet the need. And here's a really interesting thing. When you do that, the parents will recognize, and then the church will have credibility with the parents. We don't have to proselytize. We don't have to beat people over the head with the Bible. All we got to do is love them. All we have to do is show them kindness. All we have to do is show them respect. And people gravitate to that, especially if you're meeting a need. There are so many hurt people, and there are hurt children that do not know how to extricate themselves from the trauma that they've been experiencing. The Adventist Church has the tools. We have the message. We have the truth. The question is, do we have the will? Do we have what it takes, the motivation to understand that God has equipped us for such a time as this, that God has gifted us to a dying world? If we take that seriously and we do not belittle the gifts that God has given us and entrusted to us to go and help our community, then we will be successful. We will be effective. The one thing we always want to know is the community that the church is in, do the people around the church know you're there? Do the people in the community, can they tell you if somebody pulled up on the street and asked you, hey, where's the nearest Adventist church? Would they be able to tell you? And then, as Dr. Weston said earlier today and Dr. Phipps said later, we got to get out of the pew. We got to get into the community and meet and greet and connect and socialize with people who don't always look like us, who don't always believe what we believe, who may not smell like us, who may not eat what we eat, but they're God's children. And when he talks about, I think somebody read it today, Matthew, wasn't it 25? And the last verse was 40. But if you start at 34 and go to 40, Jesus outlines that when we do these things for the least of these, we've done it to him. If that's not a motivation, folk, I don't know what is. If Christ is telling you that when you respect that brother, that sister, when you feed that child, that elderly person, when you meet a need, you've done it for me. I'm telling you, that will make me shout and go out and try to help some folks. But here's the thing, we got to be organized. We have to have a strategic plan because we don't want to offend. We don't want to just accost people out in the street because we're so overjoyed with our ability to help. No, it has to be a strategic plan. We have to canvass the neighborhood. We have to invite people to some of our events. We have to have activities like smoking cessation and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings should be held at an Adventist church. We need to provide so that the doors can be open Monday through Saturday and on Sunday if they're willing. The worst thing I've ever seen is come down through the middle of a week and an Adventist church's doors are locked. No programs, no daycare, nothing. What is the community in the surrounding area supposed to think about that church? That's why they don't know we're there. And so what we have to do is understand that these gifts that God has presented to us, we cannot be selfish. We cannot keep it to ourselves. We have to get out in the community. We have to share. We have to train our young people to take leadership roles so that we don't always do things the way we've always done it. Prepare these young people. When we prepare them, they'll stop leaving the church and going out and finding something more interesting in the street. And let me tell you, preaching on Sabbath morning is a wonderful thing for those of us who are used to it for the last 40 years. But for some young people, after 15 minutes, and you're not talking about what they really are interested in, that may be a reason we lose them. So why not put them in a situation where we ask them what they want? Why not put them in a situation to say, well, you know what, young man, young woman, that's a great idea. How about you lead that out? I'll show you, I'll train you, I'll teach you, and you watch how they step up. I'm telling you, I've seen it so many times as a adjunct professor at a university in Philadelphia. When you set the bar high for a young person, they always meet it. All we have to do as adults is provide the training, the support, the mentorship, and you will be surprised what God will do through those young people. Do not belittle, do not underestimate the power of Christ in a young person when they're trained properly and they have an organized strategic plan. I'm telling you, it'll work miracles in your community.